Imperial Kongs, Translation Series Number 1. The Kong and Bai Disc, two of the most mysterious jade ritual objects, valued in China from the Neolithic period to the Shang and Zhou dynasties, spanning a period of thousands of years. These enduring forms have graced the tombs of the powerful ruling elite. We know they are important cultural relics because of the enormous amount of work and man-hours needed to grind the precious nephrite jade, harder than most iron and steel, into these sophisticated forms. Scholars have credited the late Neolithic Liangzhou culture as the originators of the Kong and Bai disc forms. The Kong is a tube of jade with a cylindrical central hole with a squared outer section, while the Bai is a flat circular ring with a proportionately smaller central hole. Enterprising and influential, the Liangzhou culture jade appears to have circulated to other Stone Age cultures hundreds of miles away. The typical Liangzhou culture Kong was decorated by dividing the tube into equal sections with a finely etched god face mask and mysterious beast motifs symmetrically positioned along the corners. Spectacular examples have been found at all major archaeological sites. Around 2200 BC, the non-Sinitic peoples that we call the Liangzhou culture disappeared from the lower Yangtze River area. They seem to have packed up, not leaving a single jade working tool. At the same period, on the Philippine Islands where no known nephrite deposits have yet been found, a flourishing jade culture appears fully formed with a network of international maritime trade with Taiwan, Vietnam, Cambodia, Burma, and Thailand. To learn more, watch 5 Things Liangzhou Culture in the Philippines. Nephrite Kongs and Bais found in the Philippines by farmers and ordinary people carry the distinctive motifs and sophisticated forms of the Liangzhou culture. The god face masks, mysterious beast face, and even the spirit being motif finely etched into the nephrite jade. Harvard researchers have determined that the Liangzhou culture used diamonds to grind and polish their jade to a sheen that we can barely match with modern diamond-tipped tools. Closer inspection shows that their fine lines were produced by even finer microscopic scratches. Kongs and Bais found in the Philippines carry in themselves evidence of the ancient tools used to make them. Drill holes were made by boring from both ends, often meeting awkwardly at the center. Evidence of antiquity may be seen on the nephrite jade itself, that over thousands of years have calcified, formed cleaving veins, differential weathering, dissolved pits, and additive exposure crystals from reacting with the environment of burial. Form, motifs, ancient tool marks, and internal evidence of antiquity are all seen on a set of extremely large Liangzhou culture Kong that had been saved long ago by a Filipino collector who had passed them on to his descendants. Each Kong, 4 have been identified so far, is over 80 kilos of astounding black nephrite, standing around 119 centimeters tall. It's highly improbable for these Imperial Kong to be forgeries because the material alone is quite valuable. Aside from the difficulty of finding these large quantities of precious jade, ancient tools and technology, close examination shows that the finely etched motifs are produced by even finer microscopic lines, almost impossible for modern tools to make. The cylindrical hole was made by tubular drills that began on both ends and met awkwardly in the middle. Internal evidence of antiquity in the jade include additive exposure crystals, which are a sign of being buried for a very long time. These 4 Kongs are much larger than any that have ever been previously found. But what makes these Kongs particularly unusual is the presence of hundreds of Chinese characters written in the Greater Seal script used in China by the Western Zhou dynasty. The Western Zhou dynasty began over 1,000 years after the Liangzhou culture disappeared from China, and yet here appears evidence that the late Neolithic culture had somehow interacted with China's classical dynasty, a voyage through space and time, only possible if the Zhou military campaign of expansion had reached the Philippine Islands, where the Liangzhou culture communities may have established their home. Further evidence of China's military expansion are found by China's archaeologists in the late Shang to Western Zhou dynasty, nephrite jade artifacts found in elite graves. It has been determined that quite a few jades were made from reworked Neolithic-style Kongs and Bais. Many of these repurposed jades were found in Lady Fu Hao's tomb, the most powerful late Shang general of her time, who may have been actively involved in the military campaigns. In Western Zhou, earlier jades were acquired by looting and distributed among aristocrats as winning rewards. Because of the ritual and symbolic importance of the Kong and Bai to the Liangzhou culture communities, scholars have speculated that they may have been accidentally found and then recycled into new pieces, but the inscriptions on the 4 giant Kong found in the Philippines give us another story. By the time of the Eastern Zhou dynasty, Liangzhou culture Kong copies were no longer so true to the original. Aside from errors in the motif designs, they made the mistake of making the Kong wider at the bottom and narrower at the top. Liangzhou culture master craftsmen rose to the challenge of making their Kong tubes smaller at the base and larger at the top. This is what we find in the 4 giant Kong. This is the first part of a translation series entitled Imperial Kongs. We call them Imperial Kongs because such large quantities of precious black jade were used that was highly likely to have come under the control of the emperor. Secondly, only one with so much power and resources could command the countless man-hours to produce these labor-intensive artifacts of ancient times. And thirdly, because the inscriptions themselves declare it to be so. Confucius, who lived during the Zhou dynasty, reminds us to study the past if you would define the future.